So the activity we're going to be doing is rounding to the hundreds, thousands place. Can you tell me how many zeros are in the hundred thousands place?
5.
So it's 5, right? So it's going to look like... Can you tell me where the comma goes?
Right here.
Okay, so the comma goes right here, right? So this is 100,000. Okay, so what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be giving you different numbers, and I'm going to tell you a certain place value to round to, okay?
Okay.
So it's going to be all the way up to the hundreds, thousands place, so I can give you random ones, okay?
Okay.
So we're going to start off with 1 first, and the strategy that we're going to be doing is 5 or more, add 1 more. 4 or less, let it rest. Okay, so now can you repeat it with me? It's going to be 5 or more, add 1 more. 4 or less, let it rest. Okay, now say it with me. Okay, so it's going to be 5 or more, add 1 more. 4 or less, let it rest. Okay, so I'm going to give you a number. Okay, the number that I'm going to choose is 692. Okay, so now I want you to round to the tens place. We're going to do this one together, okay? So a strategy that I'm going to show you is you're going to underline the number that you're rounding to. So I said the tens place, right? So the 9 is in the what?
Tens place.
In the tens place. Okay, so what number are you going to use to round to?
2.
The 2, right? And 2 is in the what?
1.
In the ones place. So you're going to draw an arrow, and you're going to circle the 2. The circle means that it's going to turn into a 0. Okay? So this number is going to turn into a 0. And if you circle it, it's going to be like, okay, this is going to turn into a 0. And the numbers on this side are going to stay the same. Okay? So this is this 5 or more or 4 or less?
I'm a 4 or less.
So what do we do with it?
We turn it into 0.
We turn that into a 0, but what happens to this?
It stays the same.
It stays the same, right? Because we what? We let it what?
Rest.
We let it rest, right? So this is going to stay the same. So what number is it going to be?
9.
A 9. And what happens to this one?
0.
It turns into a 0. And then what happens to this one?
It stays the same.
It stays the same, right? Okay, so 692 is about 690 when you're rounding to the tens place. Okay? So now I'm going to give you another number. We're going to do this one together too. Okay?
Okay.
Okay, so the number is going to be 13,546. Okay, so the number that I want you to round to is the thousands place. So what do we do with the number that we're rounding to?
We draw an arrow.
First we underline it. Okay, so don't forget it. We underline it, and then we draw an arrow where?
To 5.
To the 5, right? Why to the 5?
Because that's the number we're rounding.
We're using to round, right?
Oh yeah, we're using to round.
Okay, so what do we do after we draw the arrow?
We circle it.
We circled it, right? And what does it mean when we circle it?
It's going to turn into 0.
Okay, and another trick is because all these numbers, when you round, they're going to turn into zeros, okay? So if you want, you can circle these 2 so you know that they're going to turn into zeros. Okay, so is it 5 or more or 4 or less?
5 or more.
So what do we do to this one?
It turns into 4.
It turns into a 4. Why does it turn into a 4?
Because this is 5 or more.
So we add what?
1 more to this.
Add 1 more to this one, right? So that turns into a 4, and what happens to other numbers on the right side?
They turn into zeros.
So they turn into zeros. And what happens to this one over here?
No, it stays the same.
It stays the same, right? So the 1 stays the same. So 13,546 is about 14,000. Okay. So now I'm gonna give you another number, and you're gonna do the underlining the number that we're rounding to. You're gonna draw the arrow to the neighbor and everything. Okay. So I'm gonna give you the number. So the number that I'm gonna give you is 8,123, and I want you to round to the hundreds place. So what number are we rounding to?
1.
To the 1, right? So you draw the underline, you underline it, and then what do you do?
We draw an arrow.
We draw an arrow to the neighbor. Okay. And why to this number 2 and not the number 3?
Because this is the number we're using to round.
Okay, so that's the number we're using to round. So what do you do next?
We circle it.
You circle it. And what does the circle mean?
Oh, that's going to turn into 0.
It turns into a 0. And what can you do with the other number too?
You can also circle it.
Okay, you can circle it too. Okay, so now that we have all of that covered, what happens with this one?
Oh, it stays the same.
It stays the same. Okay, so the number 1. Is the number 2 5 or more or 4 or less?
4 or less.
So what do? We let it what?
Rest.
We let it rest, right? So does the 1 change or does it stay the same?
It stays the same.
Okay, so you could write the number 1. Okay, and what happens to all the other numbers?
They turn into 0.
Okay, so where do you put them?
Right here.
Okay. And what happens to the 8? What did you say happens?
It stays the same.
It stays the same, right? So you can put the 8. And where does the comma go?
Right here.
Okay, good job. So now that you have that covered, let's put a bigger number, okay? And you're going to be doing the same thing. You're doing really good. Okay, so that now the number that I'm going to give you is 156,823. And the number that I want you to round to is the hundreds, thousands place. So where's the hundred thousands place?
Right here.
Okay, so you underline the 1, then what do?
We draw an arrow to the 5.
To the 5, to the neighbor. Okay, and what do you do after that?
We circle the 5.
We circle it, and what is this? What does the circle mean?
And that's going to turn into 0.
Okay, and what can you do with all the other numbers?
You circle them and they turn into 0.
Okay, so you could circle all of them, and all of them are going to turn into zeros because everything on the right side turns into zeros. Okay, so now that you have everything down, is the 5 5 or more or 4 or less?
5 or more.
Okay, so what do we do to this one?
You
add what?
We add 1 more.
Okay, so you add 1 more, so put +1. Okay, so now what's 1 plus 1?
2.
2, so there's a 2. And how many zeros?
And 5.
5, so put the 5 zeros. Okay, so now where the comma goes? Okay, so what's this number?
200,000.
Okay, so
200,000.
200,000. So 156,823 is about what?
200,000.
200,000. Okay, good job. You're doing really good. Okay, so now that we've done this, do you feel pretty confident about it, or you want to do one more example?
I feel pretty confident about it.
Confident? Okay. So I have these numbers, okay? You can give me the marker for now. Okay, I have these numbers, and what I want you to do is you're going to create your very own number. You can use any number you want, okay? You can make a 100,000s number. You can make just a 10, 21, or whatever number you want. So take these numbers, and you're going to make a number, and then after you make it, I'm going to tell you what place value to round to, okay? So you could put the numbers right here. So put them in whatever order you want. Okay, so what's the number that you chose?
I'm at 35,624.
Okay, so now that you have your number, I'm going to want you to round it to the tens place. Okay? So go. Round it to the tens place. So where's the tens place?
Right here.
Okay, so what do you do first?
You underline it.
You underline it, and then you draw the arrow where?
To the 4.
To the 4. Okay, so now, is it 5 or more or 4 or less?
4 or less.
And what do? What happens to the 2? Do you add 1 more or do you let it rest?
Let it rest.
Okay, so what happens to the 2?
It stays the same.
Okay, it stays the same. And what happens to the 4?
Turns into a 0.
It turns into a 0, right? Okay, and what happens to the numbers in the front?
They stay the same.
They stay the same, right? So put them down. Okay, so since we're rounding to the tens place, 35,624 is about what?
35,620.
Okay, so what did you forget in this number? What didn't you put down?
Oh.
The comma. Okay, so now it looks like 35,620. Okay, so we're going to try it again, and you can make another number, okay? And I'm going to tell you another number to round to. Okay. So here, you can choose, you can repeat numbers if you want. I have numbers. So just make a number again.
Okay. Is it okay if I repeat a number?
Yeah, that's fine. Okay. So what was the number that you chose?
929,853.
Okay, so it's 929,000 what? 800.
853.
Okay, so let's say it together. 929,853. Okay, so for this one, I want you to round to the thousands place. Okay, so where's the thousands place?
Right here.
Okay, so it's the 9, right? So what do you do first?
You underline it.
So you underline it. And then?
You draw an arrow to the next number.
So you draw an arrow to the neighbor, okay? And what happens to the numbers on the right side?
They turn into zeros.
And what happens to the numbers over here?
They stay the same.
They stay the same, right? So is the hundreds place 5 or more or 4 or less?
5 or more.
So what do we do to the 9?
We raise the score.
We add one more, right?
Yeah.
So you add one more. So it's 9 plus 1, right? So what's 9 plus 1?
10.
So how do you write it if it's a 10? Do you put 10 down?
No.
No, what happens to the 1?
I think it
Remember, when you have a 10, it's like having 10 thousands, right? So it's going to be like this, 10,000. Remember, if you're having trouble with this, so this is the ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, and 100,000s, right? So if you have 10,000, and what's this? What place value is this in?
10,000.
In the 10,000s, right? So it's really going to be what? 20 what?
21.
20.
20,000.
20,000, right? Because it's in the 10,000s place. Okay, so if this one turns into a 10, but it's really 10,000, the thing that you can do is just add these two together. Because if you have a 10,000, the 1 is going to be carried over to this side. Okay, so this, instead of it being a 2, is going to turn into a 3. So the 0 is going to stay right here, right? And the 1, since now it's going to turn into a 10, is going to be carried over to this side. So you're going to add 2 plus 1. What's 2 plus 1?
3.
3. And then the 9, what happens to the 9?
It stays the same.
It stays the same, right? So the 29 really rounds to what? What are these two numbers? 29 and what?
10.
No, right here.
0.
What's this?
30.
It's 30, right? So 29 really rounds to 30. And what happens to the 8?
It turns into 0.
It turns into a 0. And these numbers?
They turn into zeros too.
They turn into zeros, right? Okay, so it's really 900 what?
30.
930,000. Not 1,000, right? So whenever you have a 10 anywhere here, so let's say this was a 9, and it turns into a 10, it's really 1,000 because it was in the hundreds place. So you just carry the 1 to the next side. Okay. Okay. So now I want you to write me a number that rounds to 300. Okay. So any number that rounds to 300. So can you write me a number that rounds to 300? Like if you're rounding to the hundreds place. So if you're rounding to the hundreds place, what does the tens place have to be? What numbers are, if it's 5 or more, right? So 5 or more, it's add one more. So it's 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, right? Because those are 5 or more. So remember, the numbers are going to be from 0. So it's going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So when they get to here,
Mm-hmm.
4 or less,
Mm-hmm.
let it rest. And then 5 or more, you add one more. Okay, so these are the numbers that you use if you want to raise it. And these are the numbers you use if you want to leave it the same. Okay, so can you draw me a number? Can you write me a number that rounds to the hundreds place?
Yes.
Okay, so just write a number.
The 100, the 100.
So if you wanted to round to the hundreds place, how many numbers do you need?
3.
3, right? So just write 3 numbers that round to to 300.
Okay.
Do you want me to help you with the first example?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you wanted to round to 300,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I'm going to give you one and you tell me if it rounds to 300, okay? So I'm going to give you 248. Okay. So in order to round to the hundreds place, what number do you have to use?
The 10.
The tens place, right? So you have to use, so if you're rounding to this one, you have to use this one, right?
Okay.
So does this one round to 300? Is it 5 or more or 4 or
No,
less?
No, it's 4 less.
4 or less, right? So this one stays the same. So it's going to stay 2, and what happens to these two?
They're going to turn into zeros.
They turn into 0. So did 248 round to 300, or did it round down?
It rounded down.
It rounded down, right? So does this number work?
No.
So we know that it has to be a number bigger than this, right?
Right.
Okay. So now try to write me a number that rounds to 300. Okay. So let's check it. So we're rounding to the hundreds place, right? It's going to be this one, right? So we draw an arrow to the neighbor, and you can circle it. So is it 5 or more or 4 or less?
5 or more.
So what do we do with this one? We add what?
1 more.
So what's 2 plus 1?
3.
3, and what happens to the other numbers?
They turn to zeros.
So did this number round to 300?
Yes.
Yes, right. So why do you think this one rounded to 300 and 248 didn't?
Because 248 was below 50.
Was below 50, right? So we know 50 and up is going to round to 300. And then, but 50 and down is going to stay 200, right? Okay. So now that we know that, what happens if we have 356? Can that round to 300?
No, it rounds to 400.
It rounds to 400. Why does it round to 400?
Because this is 5 or more.
Because it's 5 or more, right? So if it's 5 or more, if it's 5 or more, it's going to add one more to which one?
3.
To the 3, right? So it's really, this one's going to round to 400. Okay, so what if it's 321? Can this one round to 300?
Yes.
Yes, right? Because the 2, it's 4 or less. So what happens to the 3? You let it what?
Rest.
You let it rest, right? So this is going to round to 300. So for the 200s, it has to be more than what?
50.
250, right? It has to be more than 250. And in order for the 300s to round to 350 to 300, what does it have to be? Does it have to be more than 50 or less than 50?
Less than 50.
Less than 50, right? Because if it's more than 50, it rounds to what?
400.
To the 400. Okay. So that was the end of our lesson. You did really good. Okay, good job. Did you understand it?
Yes.
Okay, good.